Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of VOX VOMITUS, also known as Word Vomit. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of the Kindle Award-winning novel Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as the Hotel series and the newly released Pretty Ugly. Joining me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of the Bourbon books, including Dibs, Since September, and her latest release, Move On, Melinda. Joining us today is the incredibly talented Helene Wecker, talking about her new book, The Hidden Palace, and maybe we'll talk about the new book, The Hidden Palace, as well as the entire world of the Gollem and the Genie. Welcome, Helene. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your work?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. A little bit about myself and my work. So I'm a writer who's been writing professionally for frighteningly, what is it now, about 10 years. And yeah, I know. And yeah, I'm trying to count. And is like, okay, my daughter wasn't born yet, and so
you do children math too.
Yes, always.
How old was that child? Okay, pregnant. All right, so it's about all right. Go on.
Exactly. So and let's see. So my work. So Golem and the Genie, Hidden Palace. I have done 2 books in 10 years. This is
but they're not short books,
and they're actually also out. So I think something that people have to keep in mind is writing a book is one thing, getting them out is another thing.
Yeah, that is very true. But also, I take a long time to write things. So these books are set in the turn of the 20th century in Manhattan, in the Jewish and Arab American communities that were existing in Manhattan at the time. And so it is an immigrant story, sort of the classic immigrant story told through the points of view of 2 supernatural creatures, a golem named Chava, a girl golem, and a genie named Ahmad, and their discoveries and trials and tribulations as they attempt to pass for human and fit in with the other immigrants in Lower Manhattan.
It's a great premise, and I will say, Allison's reading your first book, and I am reading your second book without reading the first book, but I did read a synopsis because I was like, we just wanted to cover all of our bases, but neither of us finished either book because the shame, they're long.
They are.
But it's so good. And honestly, today I'm wearing you can't really tell. It's a very vintagey style blouse that is kind of a turn of the century style blouse. So I wore that in honor.
Very Gibson girl, sort of the
yes.
flowy. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
I almost put on a full blown Victorian dress, but it's kind of hot here. So
don't do that.
Please don't.
I know they're not very comfortable to hang out in.
Yeah.
So I know the first book came out in 2013, and it's now 2021, and the second book just came out. So there is several years in there.
Quite a few years in between them. I think it was 8.
8. How long did the first book take you? And did you know it was going to be a series? Did you think with series?
So the first book, now I have to do math again, took me, I started it in 2006 or 7, and it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 7 years from beginning to publication for the first one, and that was okay. So I started it when I was in grad school. Actually, I went to Columbia and got my master's, and while I was there, I started writing this, and just sort of took it with me when I left. And I didn't have that much time to work on it at first, because, I got to, pay my, college debt and keep a roof over and whatever.
Exactly. You've got to eat. You've got to somehow,
So the first book took me a much longer time. Well, I shouldn't say that, because the second book took me just as long. So I didn't envision it as a series to begin with. I wrote it I wanted it to have the kind of ending where it felt like the characters kept going. So I didn't draw a line under the ending. I made it so that, it's sort of like you turn the last page, but they're about to embark on something else, something that they have, that is the culmination of everything. But it isn't necessarily, but it wasn't like a cliffhanger. It's not a cliffhanger ending. It's
I would love to explain to people what a cliffhanger is, because I actually, this is my own rant. I recently got a review that was mad that the ending of my first book was a cliffhanger because the characters are in the next book. And I'm just thinking, you don't know what a cliffhanger is now, do you? Because that's not what a cliffhanger is. And the fact that you're saying,
I've read your book, it's not a cliffhanger.
Yeah, it is not. But just the idea that if you don't kill off all the characters or explode the world, then that's automatically a cliffhanger. That's not what a cliffhanger is, people. But I appreciate that you were saying that they are going on, but it sounds like the first story was still meant to be a standalone, complete story in of itself. Because I've also read some, I haven't written any, but I've read some where it's not a complete story. And if you put it down, you aren't left with a feeling of completion or any kind of catharsis or resolution. And it's just, well, if you'd like to know what happens, you're not going to find out till you buy the next book, which I'm not a big fan of when authors do that to me.
I'm not a huge fan of that either, unless, there is a style of book where it feels like you're watching an old TV serial, or like if you watched like Doctor Who back in the old days, and it was actually like 1 half-hour segment at a time, the way they showed it in Britain, instead of smashing all of the segments into the one episode that was like 2 hours long or whatever.
Yeah, and that 4 into 1.
Yep, exactly. And that is fun, but it's a particular kind of entertainment. And I don't want that necessarily if I'm reading a book. And I prefer a finished story.
And I think it really also depends on expectations. And when you go in with the Doctor Who, knowing that's what you're getting, it's a different kind of thing versus, oh, hey, I picked up a book that's this thick, and this may not look huge, but it's actually quite dense inside. The print's very small. And I've read books like that, and it doesn't have any resolution, and you have to get the next book. So not knowing going in is a little bit of a bait and switch. And makes me fussy.
And then it's like, especially when if it's a book that long and it's like relatively involved, and then it doesn't end, it's like, there are things called editors, right? Like
sometimes it's okay to cut words. This is why our show is called Word Vomit, because if it was books this size that literally were a cliffhanger for every single one, that I feel like that would be not only exhausting for a reader, but exhausting for a writer. To just be like, I'm going to make no choices. I'm going to keep everything in. All of my characters are going to get to do every single thing that's available to them.
Or, there's especially like the bricks where it's like, this is a tome and I'm reading it. I'm like, I just want my pen, be like, cross off. Like, let's just edit this down and turn it into like a book that says exactly the same thing, but is a third as long, And
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, there are certain one author in particular I can think of whose initials are GRRM, but we won't say who.
Oh, yes. I think I've heard of an author like that.
Yeah.
Internally screaming. Go on.
Yeah. So, love his stuff, but like, okay, you could have taken off this entire side story here and just gotten them through the woods a lot faster.
And that's what I'll say about, I wasn't even thinking of that particular one. There's another one in the same genre who often will write like trilogies of books, and it felt like there was just a red line between the books, but you have to read all 3 in order to have a completion to any of the story arcs or any of the characters. And that just was a frustration for me, because I would be like, I'm not really enjoying this, but I want to see how this turns out, but I can't do it in this book. And I have to read all 3 of them just to get some kind of completion. And then you get to it and go, wait a second, 5 out of these 7 storylines were completely irrelevant and wrapped up in a way that had no bearing on the other stories, and it just felt like padding. Yeah. And that's not a thing I particularly enjoy. Yours, everything is so interwoven in here. Your editor wouldn't be able to do anything to remove these things, because it's like a Jenga piece, and then things would fall apart.
Well, and the funny thing is the book was originally much longer than that. Like, this is cut down about 25 to 30%.
You're kidding.
Because
what's the word count on this right now? Just, I mean, word count to a lot of readers means nothing, but other authors, and we have a lot of other authors who watch this show. That's how we think, because we know that pages and fonts are going to vary.
I think this one was about 135, and the second one is slightly shorter, 135K, maybe a little longer. I don't think, but I mean, at one point it was like 175,000 or something like that. Yeah, and basically because you want to talk about word vomit, like that's my it's my MO. So like I overwrite and overwrite and overwrite, and then I pare back, and with the help of other people to tell me, okay, which of these 700 things that I have going on feel the most vital to this book, and try to unweave things and take out the rest, and solidify and tighten up what I've got left.
Well, and doing that is such a key thing, and it's so important to have those people who can figure out not just, okay, it isn't working, but they can point out, okay, these are the key building blocks that without which it won't work. And they're enjoyable and they're lovely and they're amazing, but we can get by without them. And we need to, in order for the rest of it to be stronger as a whole. And that is such a skill. I have one beta that does that for me. And if she's watching right now, Laura, I love you. Because she read an opening chapter for me and was able to say, this is really, really great. However, this is where it starts slowing down. And I just yanked 4 pages, just 4 whole pages, and just went, all right, you're going over here in this document, because I trust that she knows what you need to look at and go, not helping, not working. Even if all of those 4 pages were amazing, they didn't need to be in my book.
And also you can always save that information, and then eventually there could be a Golem and Jinni short story collection of like things that are in the universe.
That's exactly what I wanted, what I've been like sort of wanting to do, especially with the material that I cut for the Hidden Palace. That book nearly killed me, and
I talk about that near-death experience. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're like, this is why you're here. I will say I was so thrilled when I saw, her debut novel came out in 2013, huge success. This is the follow-up, and I'm like, oh, it's 2021. I want to hear that journey.
This
is why we have this show. Is like, this is the journey. The 8 years.
And 8 years, and I tried to shove in all the awards and having to like type them out by hand because I can't spell half of the awards that this received, because it received so many of them. And then to go like, okay, well, where's the next one? Was it a matter of it took 8 years to write, or did the pandemic come and try to eat your book like it tried to eat a lot of our souls? Or
and all of it. So first, like when the first book was published, when I turned in Golem and the Genie, I had a baby, and that was it. And then when I started to write Hidden Palace, I had a toddler and a baby, and I hadn't figured out how to be a mom and write at the same time. And, it's that, oh God, I don't want to get into like parenting and writing and do my whole soapbox, but it's like learning how to ride a bike again. It's like, how do I do this? How do I just sit down and think about something other than like what we need to have in the refrigerator for tonight, if we have any clean clothing for the babies, if there's all that stuff just sort of like creeps into your brain, and just it becomes like early parenthood. A lot of it is about triage and like emergency, like just in time everything, and you get into that mindset, and then writing something that takes like actual rumination and stepping back and looking at things and thinking about them.
Triage is the word.
That's a great word. I was going to say, there's another author who I know, who I won't name her, but she's also a mom. And she talked about when her kids were small, it was so hard to justify closing a door in their face while they were saying, mommy, 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 mommy. Yes. Like, how do what I'm writing so important and so good and so beneficial to the world that I'm saying, not now, baby, and literally closing the door.
Yeah. It's like, I have that thought so many times. It's like, what the hell am I doing worrying about these people who don't actually exist when I've got 2 real life kids sitting on the other side of this door who are like crying because mom isn't letting them come in.
Yeah.
And
it's like the word about triage and rumination. Those two are the kind of the opposite, because when you're in triage mode and you're like, I just need to get people where they need to go, clothed, bathed, fed, the idea of, okay, then I'm going to be sitting there and daydreaming and getting my mind into this creative space when I'm on 0 sleep. It becomes this thing where my mother-in-law is currently watching my children so that we can even do this. She's also the reason any of my first book that's out on sub got written, because she recognized the importance of me having that away time where I wasn't closing a door, because it's like, here, grandma loves you, go to grandma for a bit. And I would be out and I'd be in a space where I wouldn't see the dirty dishes and the diapers and all that. And that's the only place where that rumination could happen. But that happens a lot less frequently than it would if I could just do it whenever I felt like it. So, that you had to make those choices, I completely hear you. I completely understand. And there are a lot of authors who are like, oh, well, you just compartmentalize. My mind doesn't work like that.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm not a mom. I'm a dog mom, but I also I cared for my elderly mother for 7 years. And I hate to say that's very much like having a toddler.
It is.
And I say that in a very like kind and loving way, but it's hard. It's hard to find time and hard to find space in our brains. I think we all have other things in our life that are quote unquote more important than our books. But at the same time, our books are so important to like who we are as like our soul, our self-worth. We're writers. Like without that, what are we?
And also it's also a question of like any given writing day is disposable, right? It's like you're going to end up with 500 words that you're going to hate tomorrow. So it's like that when you're looking at it that way, it's like that, or take care of this thing that you love, this kid or whatever. And so it's the spouse has a meeting tomorrow, your writing day, they can't do pickup, whatever. And so the writing is always the thing that gets deferred because it's such a long-term game. And
because it doesn't matter if you write tomorrow, like that 1,000 words you're writing tomorrow, if you're lucky, is not going to really in the long run get that book into your agent or editor's hand.
It's not going to make or break
faster. It's not going to. And then after that, it's still going to take like 3 years.
Yeah. So firewalling that time, because it is cumulative, is the thing that I am worst at. As far as like the process of writing goes, because I am very anxious. And if I know someone is in distress or someone is possibly miffed at me for, or just miffed in general or whatever, that I couldn't do the thing that they wanted me to do or whatever, I can't turn that off.
Well, Helene, it's nice to know you're not a sociopath. I think that probably plays into the fact that your book is beautifully written and very emotionally charged.
Thank you.
So this is the quote from the episode. Helene's not a sociopath.
Sociopath and neurotic it's like they sort of wrap around and meet each other at the back, right?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, because I'll admit I'm a neurotic and I have anxiety disorder, and I feel like we're all like that's me. But like I have human feelings. I'm not a sociopath. I'm not a monster.
You're just debilitating human feelings is all.
I know. I'm too worried to be a monster.
But I do think there are people who, and I would rather not make this about gender, but I do know that there are people, because they don't necessarily bear the weight of the children coming to them, or they don't necessarily have the one where they're the thing that has to get pushed off. It's easier for them to compartmentalize. So I know that may vary, because I've known other authors or people who would like to be authors who are writing but maybe haven't gotten anything published yet and are still thinking, oh, I'd like to do that. And I know a lot of them will be like, oh, well, I would just write at this point in the day, but they weren't drained from all that other stuff beforehand because they didn't have the mommies all day long, because that was going to their spouse. So
this is when
that may not always be the case in every relationship or in every family dynamic, but it drains you.
when I talk to students, and there's usually the question, college or creative writing classes or whatever, and there's so what would you tell someone, a young person writing today who wants to become a writer? And the thing
I hate that question. Sorry.
Yeah, because it's like, well, how much do you want to suffer?
Don't do it.
The thing that I usually end up saying, especially if I think there's a decent percentage of women in the audience, is if you're going to have a partner or spouse, find one who believes in what you are doing and will give you the space for it, even if you're not bringing in any money. And they sort of, there's this pause of like, that's not what we expected. And
what do they expect? Follow your dream.
Yeah, basically, every day, even if you make me, it's like, no, you find this is crucial. Like, find someone who is not going to guilt you about the 2 hours that you are taking out of your, that you managed to carve for yourself on a Saturday because they want you to go out or they want you to watch a game with them or something. I've known a number of writers who the spouse has come between them and the writing, and maybe not at first, but once kids were added or the job
or no money's coming in.
I was going to say that the no money thing, and it gets back into that what gets pushed when it's okay, this person has a wage earning salary and this person is doing something that may land a book deal or may have royalties down the future, but it's the fact between the tangible bringing something in right now and the intangible possibility. That's always the thing that goes.
It's hard to justify, and it's also and even I have an incredibly supportive spouse. I'm lucky, but it is like I still have that guilt, especially on the days where I lock myself away in my room and I'm writing all day, and I come out and he looks at me and he's so excited and he's like, how did it go? And I'm like, I didn't write anything. Or like, I wrote 50 words and they were all bad.
Yeah.
I spent most of the time either being distracted or researching or staring out the window and living it in my head and then trying to type it out and have nothing come out. So
it's so hard to remember that that's part of the process, right?
Yes.
It's like you're putting money in the bank. You are digging the hole that the well is going to, fill eventually. And it's just, you aren't there yet, but you had to write those 500 crummy words in order to get to something. And it's just so hard to remember that in the time. Yeah. And especially if you're like paying for daycare, for childcare on top of that, while, hooray, I just spent $100 today to write these 500 crummy words. I'm so glad, and yeah.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart or for someone who doesn't believe in what they're doing. And it's definitely hard, especially if you don't have a supportive spouse, sometimes finding another group of people to say, well, we believe in you and we're reading what you're doing. And it's important that you keep going. Did you have people like that for you who were reading like early drafts of this that were going, this is amazing. I need more. Please keep giving me.
I had my agent who I didn't sign with until he got interested in what I was doing almost literally from the beginning. I had like 50 pages of the book when I met him, and he heard about it and was very intrigued. And so we just sort of became correspondents where he was like my beta reader from afar. And
that's unusual. Just for people who don't know, usually you don't sign with an agent till you're subbing a completed manuscript that's usually been polished, sometimes professionally edited, and has gone through as much as you can. So the fact that he's reading it 50 pages at a time, that's really great. How did you meet him?
At Columbia, there's this thing that they do every year. I think they still do it, where, all of the professors either, bribe or pressure their agent friends into coming to what is basically.
We'll give you donuts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Basically, it's like
I would do anything for donuts.
We promise there will be liquor there. I think that's exactly what they say. And so all of the agents sort of gather and the students gather, and it's the professors tell you to practice your pitch, your elevator pitch or whatever. And so
then elevators anymore. I love that idea. It's like,
I know. Remember when we took
an elevator with these people? You're going to pitch like a delivery guy, right? Like,
yeah. And now like it, because in the before times we were in elevators with other people, but now like all elevators say like, well, you know, like one person per elevator ride. So yeah.
One household per elevator.
Yeah.
Are you related to your agent? Then you probably don't need to pitch them anymore. You're fine.
Well, I love that you got an agent in like this non-traditional way, because I got my agent in a non-traditional way. My agent also signed me based on a book I had already written, but was already out.
Oh, nice.
And then she was just like, well, what are you working on now? I pitched her 3 ideas. One was a joke that I had joked to Allison like 2 days before. I was like, you know what would probably sell if I wrote a book called blah, blah, blah about blah, blah, blah.
And I said, that's not a joke. You should actually keep that.
So as I pitched 2 ideas to my agent, she was like, those are good. What else do you have? And I was like, pitched the joke. And she's like, that is the idea.
Yep.
And I was like,
never pitch a joke if you don't plan on writing the book, folks.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm 75,000 words into that joke right now.
Still waiting on the punchline.
But it was so funny. Like the second I got off that meeting, I like messaged Allison right away. And I was like, she signed me and she wants blah, blah, blah. And she was like, of course she does. Of course she does. I know. So, but like, that was not like the normal way to get an agent. Your way is not the normal way to get an agent. For all of our people who are watching this, who are fellow authors, they understand. Like, you're in the querying trenches for
some people for
a long time.
Years. Yeah,
I mean, sort of feel survivor's guilt over not having sort of leapfrogged over that process, while the rest of my friends were like checking their email every 5 minutes, like waiting.
And they're like, "Oh, I just got my 200th rejection."
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
I mean, basically, when you're in the querying or submission trenches, there's this kind of love-hate. Like I can see right now, I'm looking at my computer screen, and there's a little red dot by my email. I don't want to look at it. I mean, I'm not going to during the show anyway, but I just don't want to look at it at all, because who knows what it is. It's never good.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. So the fact that you had an agent who was talking to you, and I'm assuming kind of guiding the process as it went to tell you, okay, this is what I like, and can also look at, hey, what's it going to look like when it goes to the submissions editors, and maybe even know which submissions editors might want it. I'm sure that gave you a huge advantage, because that person was already on your team, not just like, okay, I'll take this manuscript, but they'll take the idea and work with you to get there.
Exactly. And what I learned later was that he had been sort of, you know, when he would do a sale somewhere and they, you know, and the editor would say, well, what else you got? Well, you know, sort of keeping tabs on each other. And he would talk about, you know, this thing he's got in his back pocket that, you know, maybe coming down the pike, that was this Golem and Genie thing. And so he had, you know, sort of low-key pushed it.
Yeah, he's priming the pump so that when it comes out, there are people who are like, gimme, rather than.
And it ended up at auction. So
I was just going to ask if it ended up at auction, because I know, like, so my amazing agent, Paula Mounier from Talcott Notch, I'll just give her a shout out.
Hi,
we're still like very early in the process, and I'm not even allowed to like talk about it. But she knows the concept, and she was just like, I know how to sell that. Like she understood, even just as a concept. Now, whether she reads it when it's like I'm, you know, close to being done and goes, oh, this is not what we talked about, go back. But it's just like a really, like, that could definitely happen, and I would be fine with that. But it was just, it's interesting to have somebody who understands the business and understands what you're writing and still says it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because I think we all know that 90% of writing, even when you have somebody saying, no, it's a good idea, is typing something and saying, I don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm doing it anyways, but I feel like it's not a good idea.
So Elisa von Schimmelmann wants to know, do you save those ideas that you take out of one book for pacing for future books?
I do. And that is something that so a bunch of the stuff that I cut from Hidden Palace that I was thinking about turning into short stories, some of it is going to possibly end up in book 3. And yes, there is going to be a book 3.
Are we getting the exclusive announcement?
No, it's
pretend it's the exclusive
we
announcement.
always ask. We're like, can it just be the exclusive announcement? The exclusive announcement, everybody.
It's not quite exclusive. I mean, I have another book on my contract, so it's, I have to write something. So
and if you've got one award-winning bestseller and then like another award-winning bestseller, like that just came out like Tuesday, was it Tuesday? It came out yesterday?
No, it came out in June. Beginning in June 8th.
Okay.
So, but see, I have the stuff that I can work in, except that I don't think I'm going to be able to do it word for word. It's not like I can just, airdrop these pieces in.
Done.
Way too easy, Helene. Way too easy.
Like
I
now,
know,
this
right?
book only took me 6 months to write.
Well, that would be nice. But it is sort of
nice?
like I got like my steps 1 through 3 thinking done.
Yeah.
And so I can take the concepts and write them. It's like I'm still farther ahead than I would be if I was just starting it from scratch. But because it's like, the characters, I have to age them up. And once I age them up and once I put them in, it's going to be,
what years is it going to be?
It's going to be set in 1929 to 31.
Yes.
So, which
that
is
my
random years. Nothing happens then.
Favorite.
Yep. Sort
Well,
of
and
the end of Prohibition, the beginning of the Great Depression. It's sort of like we've had our Roaring 20s and everyone has a hangover, and now stuff's going to get real.
Yeah,
and
it's been the bloodiest time in American history.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, all sorts of.
It's just like it's like a good time. It's like we just really feel like it's a feel good book.
Well, and I'll just shout out for Elisa. Elisa is a fellow writer. She writes with me on Mondays or Tuesdays or whenever we get together. And she is working on a series herself and has kind of jumped ahead in some of the books to figure out what goes later. So the whole idea of pulling from one and then using it in the other, I'm sure she's like, can I pick your brain on how this works exactly? Because the fact that she's jumping ahead like that. I have another writing friend who's like, yeah, is it wrong that I'm writing the sequel to the book I haven't finished? I'm like, what are you doing? I know you're a
that
pantser.
like hurts my brain.
Okay, well, and we were joking because we're both pantsers, and I say I'm a flashlight discovery writer, which sounds much better than I'm a stupid pantser.
Fancier.
Right, it does. But the idea being I can only write as far ahead as I can kind of see things. So I don't jump ahead because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen over there. And I was joking with this other friend. I'm like, you're like a strobe light discovery writer, just all over the place and spastic and jumping way ahead. I'm going, but she's like, well, but the scene had to take place in this setting. And I'm over here in this book, in this setting. So it had to happen. So, I mean,
I wish I had that freedom. Like, I
just don't.
I can see there being like, if I need, if there's going to be a third book to the series and I need to figure out where book 2 ends, maybe the best way for my brain to figure it out is to start book 3 and figure out where I need to end up and then write the stuff in between here and there. I can kind of see that.
I can see that. I mean, weirdly, the book my work in progress right now, I was like flailing for like a good 10 to 15 to 20,000, 30,000 words. And I was like, I don't know what the end is. And then I was like, oh, I'm just going to write this prologue that's actually like a random ending of this book. I don't know if I'm going to keep it, but I was just like, so then I wanted like the whole book to be like in a flashback. And I'm like, oh, so I have like this vague notion of if this was an HBO limited series, what would that first 10 minutes of the episode be with Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman and whoever, is, I was like,
Dreamcast.
What is the Dreamcast? I'm just dreamcasting. Like, what is that like thing where people go, oh, how did they get there?
Yeah. That's a good way.
And then I've just been like, I don't even know if I can get there. But weirdly at 75,000 words, I'm like, oh, I think I'm getting there. Like, I get it now.
Well, so Dreamcasting, Helene, I skipped ahead and I read your author's note at the end because I was fascinated by one of the things about the origins of your two characters being kind of like versions of even just you and your husband in ways of your own ethnic backgrounds factoring in and then mythologize, which I adore that. Assuming you guys can't play yourselves in the movie. Also, you don't really resemble a woman made of clay with like human hair grafted on, which is both amazing and horrific all at once.
It's amazing. It's like
I'm
who
having a
I
really
want
hard
to
time-
be.
Well-
I was just like, can't I have human hair grafted on?
We done
It would
it.
make
Good
things
enough.
so
Like,
much
yeah, I dyed it red.
easier.
I'm made of dead people.
Nah.
We are kind of made of dead people, all of
I
us.
was gonna say, aren't we? Aren't we made of dead people?
So I want Rachel Weisz to play Hava.
Yeah.
Would you somehow make her bigger? Because I feel like Rachel's a little too.
She's too like.
I don't want to say dainty, but she's a little more
petite.
dainty than I'm picturing.
I feel like she's taller than me, but not as.
Everybody's taller than, well, other than me. We're the same size.
I know.
There
Like,
might
don't you say it?
There might have to be some like Lord of the Rings force perspective.
I was gonna say like Tom Cruise
going on a
style
little
camera
yes,
action.
exactly.
She's always
She's always standing on the box.
But
But
reverse what they did to Minnie Driver in Circle of Friends, where they put her in a trench so that
yes,
Chris O'Donnell would be on the box and
yes.
so small. Sorry.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh my God.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having like some sort of like 90s
Sorry.
Flashback.
breakdown right now. Like, oh, I got it.
Alan Cumming in that movie.
Oh,
Boy.
God.
Right. So, okay, now I got to come back.
I just went Alan Cumming in Schmigadoon, so I'm like, all
I
right.
will take the Schmigadoon for no other reason that I will see anything that Alan Cumming is in.
It's
I
so
have that
good.
rule for a lot of actors.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's in it, done. Put it
Yeah.
on.
Schmigadoon is, it was exactly what I needed late pandemic when we were like, oh, there's going to be hope for the world. And then we're like, oh, I guess there's not hope for the world.
Yeah.
But we had that like glorious week where we binge watched Schmigadoon and sang all the songs. So get the Apple.
I will.
And honestly, it's also worth it for Ted Lasso and everything else.
We have it for Ted Lasso basically, and also for All Mankind, which is really
haven't
interesting.
watched it yet.
Haven't seen that one.
We bought it for The Servant, and then was just like, oh, we're gonna, and then stayed for Mosquito Coast, and
Ours came with some device we got for a kid, and I'm like, I hear this Ted Lasso thing's good, and then massive addiction later. I'm just running around in every room going, Keely Jones, independent woman. Keely Jones.
Frank Grimm, the Independent.
oh my gosh, sorry, we're watching season 2 now.
We need to binge season up to where we just haven't had it. We keep saying we're going to clear a weekend and start, watching Ted Lasso again, and we just haven't gotten there.
We
yet.
did. We made
short,
the commitment.
So, yeah, you can do one a night and be done with it because the seasons aren't that long either.
Yeah,
that show about soccer that has nothing to do with soccer.
Has nothing to do. Oh my God, it's like 75 nerds saying it has nothing to do with the actual sport to convince me to watch.
Same.
Okay, I really like.
I like soccer. I like football.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm watching this for Jason Sudeikis, and just so I can understand what's happening on Twitter.
Yeah. Exactly.
It
was like the only positive thing happening on social media for months.
I will not get the discourse if I do not see the show.
Right, and it's important as public figures that we have to know what's happening.
I can't be caught flat-footed by the paparazzi when they ask me my opinion.
So, who would you cast as Ahmed?
Yeah,
I don't know. It would, and part of this is because I'm an old lady who has no idea about
who's cool and who's in now.
Yeah. I know. I feel like I have an idea of who I want as Ahmed, but it's like 30 years ago. It's like 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
30 years ago, though.
And it's not even technically correct, but he was in Heroes.
Okay, you're talking about Mohinder?
Yes.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. No.
I was like, whatever.
Ramathirthy? I'm gonna butcher his name, but again, I'm not sure that he's the right ethnicity.
He's
so
not,
I don't.
But
you
it's
need
that
somebody
type.
who's it's
that type.
Yeah.
As I'm like just screaming, I'm like, it's that type, but I'm not also, tapped into pop culture besides.
He's the one that we keep saying he's just too pretty. He's too pretty.
Yeah.
He's so gorgeous. I cut myself on his cheekbones. He's so pretty.
But I felt like he is like otherworldly pretty, and there's something about him, and I felt like that is the quality that Ahmed would need because it's like he's made of fire.
Yeah, he's just someone who's looked too perfect. Like he looks like
there's almost the Fae quality where it's like humans. No human looks that good.
You're just like
possible.
Alien looks, just something not right about how perfect this person is.
Yeah, it's that.
Yeah.
So, hey, viewers, send us
Yes,
messages with
exactly.
pictures of people who look like that.
Especially if you're like plugged into the Middle Eastern soap opera scene or something.
That's probably where you'd find a lot.
Exactly.
Of, like,
it would be like
right.
some breakout, like someone who is like totally hot in 7 countries that aren't this one, you know?
Right. And nobody here knows him. And he's won like his country's version of like the Emmys and the Oscars, like for like 30 years.
Yep.
And then like, then
again.
he gets a breakout and people here are like, oh my God, is this his first thing? And he's like
we've seen him for a long time.
No.
Another thing though is here's the thing: when it takes years to write a book, and then by the time it would get to something like a TV show, the actor hasn't been born yet. So you need to wait for that, because at that point, the kid is probably a fetus, and by the time it gets around, okay, now he's hot young man. And
right. Like what we always say, like you have to cast out of like Disney shows, like Disney teen shows.
Yeah.
And like the kind of like the blank faced kids that play like soap opera people's children. That like they just like, because they're like always in the background, and they're like half the time they're played by different actors, and you're just like, oh.
Did you guys see Descendants? The Disney. There's the Disney
children. She didn't have to, because Tubby doesn't make her watch. Tubby's her dog, so Tubby doesn't make her watch.
My daughter is just now like trying to get me into Descendants, and there's a guy who plays Jafar's son.
Okay, yeah, he would work. He would work.
Yeah, especially since I think he's probably 15 in the thing, but that was a number of years ago, and
so he's probably at least a legal adult by now. We can work.
Yeah, he's probably like at least 19 now.
Yeah,
could work. And by the time
Rachel Weisz then is too old. I don't know. That's the hard thing.
Like I know, but they can do that like filming style now that they did with like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and that like Irish.
Then it's like you're limiting the facial it just starts.
No, there's still. I'm not going to say more, but there's still nerds mad at the end of Mandalorian season 2.
Yep,
pulling stuff like
I'm
that.
I wasn't mad.
I haven't seen. I'm like taking out my earbuds. I'm like, I haven't seen it.
No, I will just say that sometimes there are two different camps, and some people will always say, hey, we have the technology, we can do this. And then there's others of us who say, you know what, this particular actor looks like this other actor younger. Can we just have that? Because that would probably be better.
And that's the thing is, it's like you can either spend $1 bazillion on the CGI, or you can get someone who hasn't had their break yet, just because they're not like the flagpole, whatever you want to call it, like they're propping up the summer blockbusters or whatever.
Exactly. Well, and the other flip side of that, though, is you'll also get then people who complain going, hey, this guy, and I'm going to butcher his name, but the guy who plays young Han Solo in the Solo story doesn't look anything like Harrison Ford. But it's like, you guys, you can't have everything. We can't have both. It's exactly him or it's not exactly him. But there are some actors where it's like, that's uncanny how much you two look alike, younger version. We could use this. We could get away with it.
The guy in the Matrix new Matrix trailer, Resurrection, who is not names.
It's not Lawrence Fishburne.
Not Lawrence Fishburne.
And I'm looking at who is that guy? And no one's telling me, is he supposed to be Morpheus but younger?
They're not saying. Apparently they're not saying that, like, if it's supposed to be like the young Matrix version of Morpheus, or like this is someone who is you're supposed to think of as Morpheus, but is like trained by him or something. Who knows?
Yeah, because I also went, okay, I know that's not Lawrence Fishburne, looks nothing like it, but are we supposed to just assume, well, it's also a black male actor, therefore it's the same character? Like,
and then you put him in those glasses, right? You put him in the very round, small mirrored glasses, and it's like,
are we talking about the Matrix? I left for 2 seconds.
Yes.
What's so funny is I was about to scream something about Lawrence Fishburne in the Matrix, and then I felt like even my system was like, we don't need to hear that. But then I was like, we do. We do. And you guys,
we went there.
Plugged you there, Jen, and just said, mm-mm.
I shut down. But I was just like, I hope they're talking about the Matrix somehow.
We nerded out without you. Sorry.
I love it. No, it's fine. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's like also we're time to go. We've run out of time. But this is usually what happens. The last 10 minutes, we just start geeking out about like nerdy things. And that's when I'm always like, this should be our post-show conversation. But
why wait for the post-show? Make it the show.
Why wait for the post-show? I know. People want to hear what we think about the Matrix.
Yes.
Anyways.
Every day people ask me.
I mean, I've been asked by exactly one person, but I made him ask me like 6 times, and it was my husband.
Oh.
I was like, let's talk about the Matrix again. He's like,
do we have to?
Why? But on that note,
Okay.
The Hidden Palace. And get that book up there.
I put it down. I'm sorry.
They're heavy. Helene, thank you for being here. You were amazing.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'm like, we are fun.
You
So
are.
glad you're here. So glad you're here. Everybody who's joining us live or watching us later on the replay, make sure to come back next week when we have Monica Byrne, the writer of The Actual Stars. I know.
Helene's giving thumbs up. So.
This is the book that came out yesterday. That's why I'm like,
I honestly was thinking she's thinking about The Actual Star because that's what came out yesterday.
I know, and it did.
That book I am plugging to every human who reads. I adored that book.
Oh,
it was amazing.
So I'm getting chills.
So did you get an ARC copy?
I did. She and I actually share an agent. So I've known her like online for a number of years now. And I read her first book, which was phenomenal. And we sort of fell, I know we got to go, but like,
it's okay.
She and I spent almost exactly the same amount of time on our second books. And
well, your books are the same length.
Yes. And mine came out last month and this came out this month and hers came out this month. And so we've been just sort of like book buddies going through this process together, and
sister wives.
She is amazing. She enlivens my social media every single day. She's sort of like, she lives this life that I cannot help but envy, as much as I know that I would be terrible at being like this free spirit who just sort of drives around the country when I feel like, when she feels like it and all of this. And
oh my god!
By the way, this is just going to be our promo for next week's show. We're just going to have
we're just going to
talking about. And next week we have.
Exactly.
She's probably sick of me talking about her because she's been like following my publicity because we've been doing all this together, and I'm like every chance I get, I'm like, Monica, you got to read Monica Byrne.
Well, I feel like Allison and I have this relationship with each other because in very similar ways, like we grew up together doing this,
got traumatized together.
We got traumatized together at the same time by the industry. So like, I feel like 90% of my social media things I'm like at Allison Martine, and the same thing I'm always like, why do I have Twitter notifications? I'm like, oh, Allison tagged me in something.
It's not her hair.
Thank you. It's about my hair. So yes, I love that you love her book. So please come back, everybody, next week when we're going to talk about The Actual Stars. If you're not sick of me, which I'm sure you are, but if you're not, tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the premiere of my show, Let's Scare Jennifer to Death, with author Richard Chismar talking about his work with Stephen King and also his latest novel, Chasing the Boogeyman. Thank you to everybody involved with this, Vox Vomitus. We are a copywritten podcast on the Global Authors on the Air network. I want to thank Roman Saratin, our producer, Pam Stack, our executive producer, and we will see you all